Hey good people, conscription is one of those things that people often talk about in abstract terms.
Given current global tensions, a defence expert reckons Australia should seriously consider bringing back a form of national service.
Compulsory national service.
Fresh calls this morning for Australia to consider bringing back conscription. Yep, you heard right.
But possible consequences are often miscalculated and potential benefits overestimated. This is Michael Woodhams. He's a Vietnam veteran who served in Australia's biggest battle, the Battle of Coral Balmoral, and he was conscripted. Back in 1964, conscription was reintroduced and all males were selected by a birthday ballot system. Australia has toyed with the idea of conscription over the past 100 years, implementing it and removing it, even though we held 2 plebiscites and voted no both times. But why should politicians pay attention to the will of the people? They were called Nashos in this time period in reference to the National Service Act 1964, and this man was called up at the age of 20 to serve for 2 years and take part in the Vietnam War. Did you support the war in Vietnam?
I had nothing against it either way, just being a country pumpkin from Wiluna and Carnarvon.
Prior to your conscription, did you think it would ever happen to you?
No. And I never give it a thought. Carnarvon is a backwater, 612 miles from Perth.
Now, today is the 16th of September 2024, and currently there is no appetite in social discourse to bring back the draft, which is currently suspended and has been since Gough Whitlam ended conscription and released all conscripts from service back in 1972. But the framework for mandatory service still exists, and the Overton window shifts slowly and then fast. Running a political campaign that leads with conscription today would be political suicide, but in 10 years' time, it could be an election-winning idea. Nobody would have thought that mandatory vaccines would be a campaign-winning idea back in 2018, but look how well Mark McGowan and the Labor government did in the 2021 election. You said that your father was happy, but your mother was a bit concerned?
Yes, didn't like it.
The interesting thing is, public sentiment back in the 1960s was majority in favour of national service, right up until the first national servicemen were killed in combat, and then the consequences of our decisions hit home differently. What was popular among the masses only a few years earlier was suddenly protested and criticised. A perfect example of how the Overton window can shift in only a few short years. When you arrived in Vietnam, what were your first impressions like?
Hot and sticky and smelling of aviation fuel. And crowded, because they had 500,000 Yanks there by then.
So what was some of the most difficult moments that you experienced whilst you were over there?
One day we come upon and there's a body lying on the bitumen road. Cav commander tells me and my mate to go and check this out. He's dressed in civilian clothes and his hands are tied behind him back with a big twitch stick, which is 4 foot of wood behind him. So I put a little grappling hook on him and turned him over from 20 feet back in case he had a booby trap underneath him or something is rigged. No, there wasn't, but his throat had been cut. Armoured Cav man rings up the local village and they say, yeah, that's the village headman. So one's driving a tuk-tuk and they grab him by the head and by the feet and the shoulders, and like I say, his throat had been cut. So when they grabbed him by the shoulders, his head falls off. Right. Completely. Yeah. So the tuk-tuk driver grabs that and puts it in by the hair and puts that in the back of the tuk-tuk bus.
Why did he do that?
Take him back to the village.
Right, let everyone know.
But he's left on the road. For an example, if you want to mess with a VC, you don't pay your taxes, you don't put in your rice ration, you don't volunteer your sons to fight for us. This is the next. So we start with the head man, so you all get the message.
Right, if it can be done to the guy at the top, it can be done to you too.
Yes.
Can you share any specific memories or stories from the Battle of Coral Balmoral? Coral Balmoral was Australia's biggest battle in the Vietnam War, bigger than the well-known Long Tan. It involved the NVA and VC sneaking up on Firebase Coral on the 12th of May and concluded on the 6th of June over at Firebase Balmoral. It was a huge offensive by the Vietnamese forces and a decisive victory for the Australian and New Zealand troops who held their ground against a larger force during intense combat, proving the effectiveness of Australian military tactics and resolve. The result was not only a confirmed loss of 267 Vietnamese troops from an estimated force of over 3,000, but also a strategic setback that disrupted other operations in the area and slowed the overall advancement of the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army. But nothing comes for free. So Coral, you did more fighting there than at Balmoral?
Yep.
Yeah. And you lost a friend at one of those battles?
Yes, at Coral. His name was Bill Thomas, and he was an M60 gunner.
Yeah.
And he got a mortar hit right down his foxhole. Plus there was other casualties beside him, but I knew him personally.
How did that experience and being in a war zone change you?
Well, I don't think I was emotionally scarred or a little bit frightened at the time, but you soon get over it. It's either them or us. I was, fairly well disciplined, coming from a large family and home. Not too much worried me. I was still single. It was an experience. I didn't wish to repeat it too often.
How do you feel that your government has treated you post-Vietnam War?
Before?
No, after having returned.
Very, very good. To rate it out of 10, I would give it 8.25. No complaints about Army or the government since I've returned.
Is that the government services separate from the government, or?
No, that's Veterans Affairs, I mean.
Yeah, how do you feel about our politicians in government that you had to go and fight for?
Too many soft cocks. That's what I said. If you sent the politicians' sons first to war, there wouldn't be any wars.
The cost of conscription is more than a few $1 billion and an election. It's somebody's life. It's Michael's life. He wasn't injured and he didn't die, but his life has been irrevocably changed. Some might even say destroyed by a decision he didn't make. He bore the consequences of someone else's choice, and that's an injustice as severe as being treated as a resource of the state rather than a sovereign citizen. It's one thing to go to war when you raise your hand and say, I believe this is worth fighting for, but when you're opposed to it and someone says, do it or go to jail, that's not a choice, it's an ultimatum. That's modern day slavery. The best argument I've heard in favour of conscription has at its core a belief that this policy produces positive externalities, such as fostering national pride, personal responsibility, and individual character development. While the obvious benefit of a strengthened defence force is explicitly pursued, it's interesting that supporters often see the true value of conscription as extending beyond the battlefield. This perspective may seem paradoxical given that the core costs of conscription involve the lives and liberties of individuals, while the supposed benefits are largely intangible and stretch beyond the immediate needs of the Defence Force. You need to understand that while these benefits may be real, the cost could be your life, or more likely, your child's life. You don't get all these potential gains without any real risk. It might sound fine in the abstract, but just like those who supported the conscription before the first Nashos died, it doesn't hit home until it affects someone close to you. And when it does, it's all too real. How was it for you coming back from the Vietnam War?
Okay, I rolled in at midnight to avoid all the protesters at the airport with the 2 kit bags with me, bayonet and bits, and the customs and immigration. He said, welcome home, soldier. He said, anything to declare? No. He said, great. Passed right on through.
In what ways did your experience in Vietnam shape the rest of your life?
Well, it still does today. Like I say, I shave 362 days a year, reasonably neat and tidy, bit of discipline. I still respect anyone in uniform, more self-sufficient. I've been on my own for 37 years now, but...
Have your thoughts changed about it?
Not at all.
Not at all.
I'm totally and 100% for it, but everyone. Politicians' kids go first. No marble in the gunny sack. Everyone goes. Millionaires, doctors, sons, unless your lift doesn't go to the top floor and you're shilling short, on a £5 note.
Right, yeah.
But everyone goes for 2 years, not 1 year.
Why is that?
Because I believe we got the best country in the world and now we're giving it away.
On the matter of conscription, are you in favour of conscription when there's a war or conscription across the century?
Across,
Right.
all the time, when you're 18. Yep, I'm for it, mate. 99%.
The number of times conscription has been mentioned in the news in the past 10 years has increased about 1,000%, depending on where you measure from. The parties who have expressed clear opposition to conscription are here, and the bill they would need to amend in order to take this option off the table is the Defence Act 1903, specifically Part 4, Compulsory Service. Provided Part 4 remains as it is, the Australian government would need to introduce a new bill titled National Service 2.0 or something, pass it through the House of Representatives, then through the Senate, and then it would have to receive royal assent from the Governor-General. So there are some hurdles, but they've been overcome in the past. If you learn something and you think that talking about the principle of the matter is as important as knowing which policy needs to be changed and which party supports or opposes that change, then subscribe to this channel. I'll break down the policies and tell you some key facts about them, talk about the underlying principle of the policy, and then which parties support or oppose it, so that you can make an educated decision in the voting booth. I'll try to be unbiased, but at the very least, I'll tell you what my bias is so that you can take that into account. On that note, here's my bias and personal interest on the question of conscription. I was in the army for 10 years and I deployed to Afghanistan, and this is my uncle Michael Woodhams. I learnt more about the man in 1 day than I have in 32 years, and very soon he'll be dead. I'm opposed to conscription on moral grounds, and I've seen what it can do to a man firsthand. Remember, you were born free. Have you ever spoken about your experiences in Vietnam?
Nothing like this, no. Mentioned it at reunions and with other boys that I know personally. Never with a politician or mum and dad like this. Brothers have picked up little bits. Mum still has all my letters that I sent back, but my sister's got them. She kept them in the glory box.